Well, guys, I am so happy to welcome you back to Pastors on Porn. And if you know anything about this podcast, I am always looking for pastors and churches that are, engaging in redemptive ways with this whole issue of pornography. And today, I want to introduce Garrett Kell. I was told about him in a couple ways. Garrett has written for the Gospel Coalition. There was an article I read called I Was a Pastor Hooked on Porn. He's the author of the book Pure in Heart, and he presently pastors at Delray Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. So, welcome to the podcast, Garrett.
Yeah, thanks for having me, brother. Good to be here.
Yeah, and we were just talking. You're a stone's throw from the White House and all of the craziness that's happening in that area. So, you're right in the middle of the buzz.
Yep, there's a lot going on right over on the other side of the river. So, yeah, just we always pray, but the good Lord, his kingdom is over and above all that, and so yeah, we're thankful to be here though. It's yeah, I mean, they're just ripe for gospel ministry in a lot of different ways. So.
Absolutely. Well, I want to talk a little bit about this article. I was a pastor hooked on porn, and I know it referenced you were pastoring at a previous church. Would you just kind of just talk a little bit about what brought you into this whole experience with sexual brokenness, and just share a little bit of your story because that, of course, informs the story you have and the comfort you can minister to other people.
Sure. Yeah. Became a Christian middle of my junior year of
Mhm.
college. I was around 21 years old. Everything before that, from really about fifth grade, was the first time that I was exposed to pornography.
Mhm.
An older friend showed me kind of his dad's stash, and it just awoke something in
Right.
me. A corrupted curiosity that really just flourished and grew in really destructive ways for a long time until I became a Christian. And then after becoming a Christian, there was a really sweet season of I think, repentance,
Mhm.
and then began to struggle with pornography secretly. So before I was a believer, I think I struggled with pornography, but for me, it was not the
Right.
biggest issue. It was more, bad relationships. But then
Yep.
began struggling with this, and I was just by the nature of my testimony, I was on stage pretty quickly in a
Mhm.
way that was probably not well, it might be a little too fast, but nevertheless, was on stage quickly, and I felt a pressure right away of not knowing exactly to how to walk in the light
Mhm.
as a Christian leader,
Right.
and that was just tricky. So that became a real secret struggle with pornography that lasted during some of my initial training and really the first 2.5 years of being a pastor
Right.
of the church that I was pastoring. And the hard thing was that the Lord was blessing the ministry.
Right.
So I kind of had what I call the Solomon complex,
Mhm.
where because God was blessing his word, the church was growing, people were getting saved, marriages were getting healed, the whole thing, things were
Right.
working. I had this disillusionment that I was like, I guess I'm just always going to be this way. And I guess God's okay with it.
Right.
And, the Lord is patient with us, but he disciplines those that he loves. And
Mhm.
in his mercy, brought a good friend across my path who basically I was honest with in a really full way. And he called me out and he said, brother, I love you, but I don't think you're qualified to be a pastor right now.
Mm.
And I think you need to go back and talk to your elders. And that was in the year 2007. And it began yeah, really the hardest year of my life at that point, where I, yeah, confessed to them, and then ended up going before the church and confessing to the church, really everything that I had been struggling with. At that time, I was actually engaged. My
Mhm.
my now wife, then fiance, she knew everything, and there had been a season of repentance, but I'd just not been honest. And
Right.
yeah, went before the church, and up to that point, I really thought, man, I'm going to have to die to get free from this. And that's really, in a sense, what I say happened that night on the stage, where I really had to die to my fear of man. And,
Mm.
it just changed life. It was about a 6 or 7, 8 month process of meetings and counseling and all that kind of stuff, but was able by God's grace to be restored at that church and continued serving. And served for another 2.5 years there. And we really saw the Lord in his mercy bring about a change in the culture of the church, what it meant to walk in the light and to help one another to walk in the light. And yeah, by God's grace, he showed a lot of mercy and really, I think, changed the way that I think about what it meant to be a Christian leader,
Right.
and to try to walk honestly and humbly, but before the Lord and others.
Now, in that article, you reference some kind of crazy meetings that became public, which you had anticipated, but there sounded like I mean, there were people who were gracious, but it sounded like there were people who were angry, there are people who were upset. I was a
Mhm.
little confused from the article because, and I'm not minimizing just the fact that you were struggling with porn, but you expressed to the elders, and then it became a public meeting, the gamut of what you were struggling with. Was it simply porn, or was it a whole other extensions of behaviors that people were responding to? Where was the broken trust? That's kind of where I was curious that people were experiencing.
Well, I mean, I think, at that point, I was a
Hmm.
young pastor who I
Right.
think I was struggled with pride in lots of different ways, and so
Hmm.
I think there were probably other things that were annoying
Okay.
or sinful
Right.
in particular ways, maybe some entitlement, maybe some this
Hmm.
and that I think this gave occasion for people to say, and while we're at it, this
Right.
also, and and to be honest, and to be fair to a lot of the people who were there, I mean, I sinned against them as their
Right.
pastor, so
Right.
so their feelings of grief and sorrow and righteous anger
Hmm.
were justified largely,
Right.
even if their flesh got a hold of some of them and took it
Sure.
in bad directions. It was my sin that caused the mess,
No,
and
I get it.
I acknowledge that. But yeah, I think, and also in a small town like that, when you start confessing things
Hmm.
and the word starts getting around, I mean, it
Right.
mutates, and there was rumors and all kinds of stuff like that. That the public meeting, people got to ask questions, and it
Hmm.
was yeah, it was. I mean, it was wild. And
Right.
yeah, I
I'm
mean,
there.
we learn what not to do also, but I think what you not do is don't be a hypocrite in your leadership, and you won't, have to lay in this kind of bed. And I think the Lord used the midst of the mess
Hmm.
to humble me, and because I had lots of opportunities to go elsewhere, and other friends
Sure.
calling and saying, "Hey, you want to do this or that?" And I just sensed the Lord was saying, "Buddy, you made this mess. You need to lay
Right.
in this. You need to walk this process out, and you need to show this church what it means for you now to be under the Word and to be under,
Right.
this sort of the Lord's hand." And for me, that was the right call, and I'm thankful that I did.
Yeah, and in that Gospel Coalition article, you referenced that meeting, and out of that, you talked. Hypocrisy was one of those 5 points that you just referenced. Some of the lessons you learned from that
Mhm.
time that are still ongoing lessons. You want to just walk through those because I think
Yeah.
those are timeless.
Well, I think leaders are called to be examples to the flock, and I think we all know that we're imperfect. There's only
Hmm.
one who's got it together. It's Jesus. So I think
Yeah.
there's a real pressure to pretend sometimes for leaders
Right.
generally to kind of act like we have it together. And when
Hmm.
you have hidden sin, that kind of pressurizes and mutates in a strange
Right.
way. So I was a mask wearer in a lot of ways. That was yeah. I felt I didn't understand what it meant to be a gospel oriented leader who was
Hmm.
humble and honest. I just didn't have really a framework for that. So there was a pressure to pretend. I think hypocrisy it was real. Again, the mask wearer, that's what a hypocrite
Yeah.
is one who wears a mask. And it was suffocating my soul,
Hmm.
because you're behind this mask and you can't breathe as well. And
Right.
it was changing me in ways where I was having to learn to adapt to preaching with some guilt. Not having a clear conscience as you minister makes you weird, and
Yeah, I get
you
that.
either overcompensate and you start like getting really hard against sin because deep
Hmm.
down you wish that was you,
Yep.
or you start being a little more easy with somebody. You're like, that's not good, but it just changes you. You can't just in freedom
Right.
be an instrument, that the Lord wants to use. So that was going on. Um, I think I realized that you can't do this alone.
Mhm.
I had people around me. I was a sociable guy. I had friends,
Hmm.
but didn't know what it meant to have people in my life who had a full view, who knew
Right.
everything about what was going on in my life. I have my elders that I serve with now. These brothers know everything about me. And there's three
Right.
guys in particular who know everything about me.
Right.
And I just didn't have a category for what it meant to do that. I think, a pressure to perform, even though they weren't expecting that. So I've learned to surround myself with people who love me and are not impressed with me.
Hmm.
Those are the
Great
safest
line.
ones for me. Like, they
Yep.
care about me. They want to help me to heaven. All they care about is I make it home to heaven, that I love my wife Carrie, that I love my kids, and that I'm a Christian.
Hmm.
And that's what they care about. So they don't care if I want a
Right.
podcast. They don't care if I read a book. They don't care if I speak at something. Like, they don't care. They love me. Those are the best people. I think another thing was I learned the importance of honesty now. So, like,
Hmm.
now is always the
Right.
time to be honest. So if you feel convicted about something, now is the time to leave your offering at the altar and go deal with the Lord, confess to whomever you need to confess, be honest, because otherwise you can start to rationalize and justify, and you just bury it. And it's like, if you get news that you have like stage 1 cancer. You're like,
Hmm.
and you start just pretending it's not there, and you just kind of press on thinking, it'll fix itself. It's not going to fix itself. It will grow. And
Right.
sin is like that in a really dangerous way. So now's the time, to step into light, and to know that you may lose everything, but you won't lose Jesus. He
Right.
promises he will never leave you or forsake you. And in fact, it's by losing everything that you gain him. And whatever it costs you, he is worth it. There's an intimacy with him that comes through, yeah, honesty, that's not really possible
Yeah.
anywhere else. So yeah, he loves to help the needy.
Well, I love that imagery of stage 1 cancer, which of course becomes stage 2 cancer and moves on.
Mhm.
And I know in talking and working with Christian leaders, one of the things we've talked about is how, one of our jobs is to call people into the light. And how do we call people into the light when we're still standing in the shadows? And that just doesn't work long term. It doesn't work at
Yeah.
many levels. And I love the idea where you even say it subtly changes us. Either we're just making light of some of those sins that are destroying people's lives, or we're overcompensating and in some of those aspects. So I saw you on a podcast. It was called The Everyday Pastor, and you in that podcast, it was there was a period where you guys were talking about the old Professor Howard Hendricks. If anyone's been around for a while, certainly in Baptist circles, you've heard of Howard Hendricks. And apparently, he had done a study of 246 pastors who had lost their ministry. And there were some things, which is a great follow-up to what you just talked about. Some of those things that were going on with pastors in retrospect. Do you want to just
Mhm.
speak about that? Because that was such a great part of that podcast,
Yeah, and I remember this was, I was struggling secretly with pornography at this time,
right?
while I was in seminary. So this was kind of, some warning shots over the bow,
Yep.
as it were, for me. But we had this leadership class with Prof, and he basically we were studying David, and then he did this whole deal on adultery, and he said that he had found a group of some 246 men who had all, within a 2-year
Hmm.
period, disqualified themselves with some sort of extramarital affair, that they had committed
Right.
adultery and disqualified themselves from the ministry. So he met with all of these guys and did kind of a postmortem, kind of, hey, let's look at some, are there any commonalities? And he found four.
Hmm.
The first was, he said that none of these men were involved in any kind of real personal accountability. They were
Right.
always around people, but nobody knew them, meaning
Okay.
nobody knew exactly what was going on in their lives.
Hmm.
So they were kind of isolated. Secondly, each of the men had basically all but ceased having a daily time of personal devotion with the Lord.
Hmm.
They were in the word, but not under the
Right.
word. So they're constantly in the word because they're teaching it to others. That's what their
Sure.
job is. But but it was like some kind of, disease where you eat food and it goes through you and expelled, but you don't get any of the nutrients. That's
Right.
basically what was happening. They weren't having personal prayer. They weren't fasting. They weren't, singing to the Lord in their private time. Like it was,
Hmm.
they had that was gone, right? Thirdly, more than 80% of the men had become sexually involved with a woman by spending too much unguarded time with her, almost always in some sort of counseling situation.
Okay.
So there just wasn't wisdom in
Right.
in protecting yourself from, and it's a recipe for disaster because you got a dude who's not well in his soul because he hasn't
Sure.
been abiding with Jesus, and then you've got a sister who is not well because something's going on in her life, and
Mhm.
now, man,
Yeah.
these two people who aren't filled up with Christ or are just hurting or whatever it may be, that's a recipe for disaster. And then the fourth one, uh, without any exception, every single one of the men in some way, shape, or form said, "We never, quote, thought it would happen to me."
Mm.
They just assumed because they were capable men that they'd be able to hold it together and either fake it or that they were deceived enough that they thought they'd be able to just keep going, that they never thought that this kind of fall would happen to them. Which, man, that terrifies me, brother. I
Yeah.
mean, like, take
Yeah.
heed lest you fall. Like this is, we're on here doing a podcast talking about this. I don't
Hmm.
I don't want 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road and be like, hey, find this clip of this guy doing. I mean, it's just like it can happen to any of us. And
That,
it's
yeah.
humbling.
It reminds me of an interview I did with Joe Beam, who works with couples going through affairs, and he talks about the process where you go from a possibility to a probability and then to a
Mm.
high probability by some of these things. Well, let's personalize that then, Garrett. Let me ask
Sure.
you, what are the precautions in your ministry currently that you take to not be one of those clips that people go back to 10 years later and say, so just normal, healthy precautions you take.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think first and foremost, I try to never forget that I'm first a sheep and then a
Hmm.
shepherd. So
Okay.
I am, Jesus said one thing is necessary, and that is what Mary did. Mary sat at his feet. Mary, for me, has actually become a really sweet
Hmm.
model of faith. Like every time you see her in the New Testament, the Mary who is the brother sister
Hmm.
of Martha and Lazarus, she's always at Jesus's feet. There's three
Right.
times she shows up. She's at his feet, and I've just begun to really
Hmm.
plead with the Lord. I want to keep that. I don't have to be a pastor, but I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
I'm a husband. I'm a father. So I think first and foremost, I want to keep those devotional times sweet. There's a pastor who, if I said his name, you might know it, but he recently disqualified himself from ministry. And there was somebody who shared that in a class they had asked him, so hey, what's your personal devotional time look like? And he said, well, I actually don't have time for that with my travel and writing and all the schedule of things.
Wow.
I feast on what I feed others, and
Hmm.
sadly,
Yeah. Yeah.
secondly, I surround myself with people who love me and know me. So my fellow elders, we create a culture where
Hmm.
if you try to fake it, it's not going to go well. Like the sort of
Hmm.
openness and honesty that we live is really, really important. So we have that with one another. We have that in informal ways, just through
Hmm.
our friendships. And then we also have that through some formal ways where every 2 months our elders they get a form that we have to fill out that kind of does every area of life. How you spend your time, your money, who are you
Hmm.
evangelizing? How's that going? How are things with your family? And then in this area as well, have you compromised by looking at anything, explicit, intentionally or unintentionally, all the stuff where you can lie if you want to, but we want to make it hard to lie, I mean,
Hmm.
because of the sort of culture of just honesty around one another. So there's that. And then personally, I have so much barbed wire put up in my life
Hmm.
that it's hard for me to get to porn. So right now, if you put a gun to my head and told me to pull up pornography on my phone, I couldn't do it. It's dumbed
Okay.
down
Yep.
enough to where I can't. And so like if I want to, like this morning, I asked my wife to turn on download apps so I could refresh my apps so my banking app will work. I mean, like
Yes. Screen
I,
time.
I'm like I'm sorry you married a 13-year-old, but can you
Oh,
let
Garrett,
me
you're
do
speaking
this?
my language. Yeah.
I know myself,
Yeah.
I have
Yep.
covenant eyes on my devices and have all that kind of stuff. And it's not a plug for them particularly, but stuff that helps to
No, I
filter.
understand.
And
Yep.
I just have to, so for me, I want to make it difficult to get to explicit material. I want to
Right.
make it hard to do that. And I have 7 kids, which is a
Yep.
lot of kids, but in one of the things that I've in trying to help them come up in this crazy world that's only progressing all the worse toward I mean, it's a mess, but like the amount of work that I have to do, it's like a legitimate part-time job to be
Mhm.
able to keep smut out of my house through
Yep.
smart TVs or phones or
Yep.
devices that they need for school or whatever it may be.
Sure.
I mean, Xbox, whatever. Like I'm
Yep.
trying to, I mean, I need a new degree in,
Yeah.
technology and all this kind of stuff. But I'm having to do that. So we have like 6 layers of protection at our house with different
Yep.
filters and stuff on everything. And all that to say, it's an intentional thing. And,
Yeah.
the world is designed to make it easy to sin and hard to be holy.
Hmm.
And it takes legitimate work. So, I mean, I think it's one of the things. Actually, I'm going to call a brother this weekend at church who's just, praise
Hmm.
God for nerds, but dude's a legit
Yeah.
nerd who knows how to do all this stuff, and say, listen, I actually have I love you and have a wonderful plan for your life. I want you to think about how you can come into families' homes and
Hmm.
spend an hour or so with them and their kids' devices, and like let's lock stuff down and let's help parents who don't know because they don't know anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
so
the
many
kids are
parents are
going to be
just
going, I hate that guy.
I hate that pastor. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll be
what
like, well,
does
you
he
hate me
do?
now. You hate me
Exactly.
now, but someday you'll be thankful. So, yeah.
Oh man. And I've been working with guys. Here's just a thought, and I'd love to get that form from you at some point to ask pastors. I've
Mhm.
actually changed the language if from going just have you looked at from sexually explicit material to sexually arousing, intentionally arousing material, because so many of
Mhm.
our guys that I work with in our groups are now using Instagram and they're using Facebook and they're using YouTube and they're going, well, technically, well, anything that
Technically,
follows
yeah.
that, but they have the exact same relationship with Instagram that they did with whatever. So, um, okay, let me ask you this question. One of the common phrases that's used in with pastors is this term above reproach, and I'm familiar with it. I don't know it always means the same thing. One of the things you said in the podcast is we want to have leaders who are not just resisting sin, but examples of repenting of sin. And here's my question.
Mhm.
How would you distinguish between a pastor who is struggling and a pastor who is disqualified?
I think it's an excellent question and one that's requires, yeah, a lot of wisdom. So I did write an article for 9 Marks on this, which
Okay.
maybe a link that would be that's
Yes.
does pornography use disqualify a pastor? Same kind of category. There's also one I did for Desiring God. Does pornography use lead to church discipline? So those two things are kind of
Okay. Thank you. I'm
related,
not
and
familiar
both
with
those
those.
might be good to
Yes.
link.
Okay.
So I give a lot of nuance in all of that. I think the short of it is to recognize that not all engagement with evil material is the same.
Hmm.
So there's a difference between a guy who's like, my wife went out of town. I
Yes.
started watching some movies and I thought there might be something in this one. And I saw a scene and then I rewound it. And then I was like, gosh, and I turned it off and I prayed and I cried and I emailed you guys right away and just said, hey, need to let you know I was on TV and I did this thing and talk to me about it tomorrow
Hmm.
versus a guy who has, a burner phone that he's been lying for 3 years
Yeah.
and has a whole nother account and personal, like the
Yep.
level of deceit and,
I've heard it all. Yep.
those are two
Yep.
different things.
Hmm.
And I think we need to understand that they're two different things. So I think some guys can be Phineas-like in a way that could be unhelpful to where you're like, oh, the first guy, he's automatically disqualified no matter what.
Right.
I'm like, I'm like, maybe, but maybe not. I mean,
Hmm.
if this brother has been convicted, he's acknowledged this. He reaches out. He's like, "Tell me, I'll do whatever." And then he begins to make,
Hmm.
make steps. He's like, I figured out how to get rid of, this thing or whatever it is.
Right.
Um, that's where I think it's a case by case basis. So things we want to look for are what other sins are associated with it. What sort of deceit has been going on? What
Right.
sort of lying has been going on? What other
Yes.
things? Because to be honest with me, to be honest with you, that for me, that is just as much of a deal
Oh,
as what you looked at. It's a can you be trustworthy? Like can when you're talking, can people believe you or not? Right. So I think that's
yeah, and I'll
one
certainly
major
want to reference those two. One of your staff members, comes to you Monday morning and says, Garrett, I screwed up this weekend. I went home after church. My wife was gone, and I realized I had a link, and I was looking at porn all afternoon. And man, I feel, you know, that would that's a situation
Yep,
as a staff leader.
it is. Yeah. Yeah.
What would
So I mean, I think yeah, case by case basis though. But
yeah,
let's say it's that.
sure.
First thing I do is the same thing I would do with any church member who comes and acknowledges this. I'd say, well, first of all, I just want to praise God that you've told me.
Yes.
Thank you. Like it's evidence of God's Spirit working in you. Praise God. Thank you also, especially as being a staff member, because your whole livelihood is tied to this, and like
Yes.
that's
Absolutely.
extra hard. So I want to
Yep.
acknowledge that, right? And then I say, let me just ask you some questions. So next question for me is, when else has this happened,
Hmm.
and how often has this happened?
Yep.
And because I want to determine, is there a pattern here? And if this
Hmm.
is the first time, that's one conversation. If he's like, I've actually been doing this for 3 years.
Right.
Every time she travels, which is once a month, I do this.
Yep.
That's a
Okay.
different conversation, right? So I think I want to determine pattern because that helps to then look at the deceit, how long this has been going on, all that kind of stuff. Let's say it's just the first one. This is the first time. It's been like 6 years since he looked at anything, or 10 years since he looked at anything, and he fell. I think I want to say, well, first thing we want to do is we want to think about how do you want to talk to your wife about this?
Hmm.
Um, what does it look like to involve her in this situation? How are you guys thinking through this in your own marriage? What have you guys agreed to? What is she expecting from you?
Because you made a
Right. So
comment in one of your podcasts, I think it was you that said, if you can't be honest with your wife, well, then you're not going to be honest with other people. I think some of that,
yeah, yeah. There's definitely a lot of that. I mean, I think again, I can quit referencing articles. I just talk about this stuff a lot. So I wrote
yeah,
one that I think Southern picked up,
okay.
SBTS picked up. That's
Mhm.
something like, should I talk to my spouse about my struggles with sexual purity?
Good.
And it's a
Okay.
whole
We've got
thing of like,
three articles then. Yes.
how do you think about and basically
Yes.
what I tell couples to read this and
Yeah.
then you all talk about it because not every couple is the same, right?
I
Like what my
understand.
wife would want, others
Nuance.
wouldn't. But all that to say, the question is then what would she expect in this situation? And it, for one guy, maybe she'd want me to tell her. I'd be like,
Mhm.
okay, do you want me to go with you? Do you want to have that personally? Do you want me to meet with y'all afterwards? You let
Okay.
me know. Or for some wives, it may be, I don't want you to tell me unless the elders think it's reached the level that I need to know. And it may
Okay.
be in this case, we just
Hmm.
have to do more questions. But so for me, that guy wouldn't automatically be DQ'd. Now there may be some like, you know what? I think what we want to do is
Hmm.
let's examine avenues to getting this. Let's lock it all down. Secondly, why don't we set up for you and probably with her for the next like say 3 months? Let's do some counseling. Let's get you guys set up. Let's see what
Yeah.
other things are going on, all that kind of stuff, and get some intense discipleship going on. And then we can kind of go from there. And if the
Okay.
brother's amendable and humble and teachable and all that, but if he starts bucking up and starts like I'm not doing that or any of this kind of stuff, I think you begin to see there's bigger issues. Or if it's the second guy who, has been doing this for a while, it may be a, hey, listen, this is severe enough
Yeah.
that we think you've disqualified yourself from serving at this time. Other guys maybe somewhere in between were like, you know what? We're actually going to encourage you to go on a sabbatical for 6 months
Hmm.
and you can stay in the pay of the church. But this is significant enough that we think it's actually a really good time. And the way we'll explain to the congregation is that some things have come up in their marriage. It's an important time for them to work on things. We're thankful they're both open and
Hmm.
amendable to that. We want to provide some resources to help them, and can ask that you would pray. And so, I think it's a case by case basis.
Yeah, and I
So
love you talked about deceit. You talked about is there a pattern? You talked about incorporating how does your wife incorporate that? And then the posture of humility you're looking, in terms of responsiveness of the heart, as that. It does just the last question I want to ask you is just about church culture, because I love
Mhm.
the fact that if you are practicing this kind of culture with the church, where was that quote? You made a great quote. You said, um, we are not all weak in the same way, nor are we all strong in the same way. Being authentic is not an end in itself. Satan is glad for people to talk openly about their sin, so long as they make no strides towards repentance. Would you talk a little bit about the culture you're trying to encourage in your church, which this may be different than other churches where this is just
Mhm.
unmentionable. And so I'm just curious how you try to do that with not just
Yeah,
staff, but people who come on Sunday morning.
sure. Yeah. Though it's never safe to sin, a healthy church should be a place where it's safe to struggle, legitimately be honest about stuff, right? So
Right.
I'd actually say if you can't if you can't talk about this openly in your church, something has to change immediately.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
I think it's an evidence of the church not being healthy. The
Right.
Bible's really clear about a lot of stuff. Like you read through the Bible, man, people are wiling out, and you need to be able to be like, this is happening here
Yep.
too. I mean, we need to talk about this. So I mean, first thing, we will do this often. Like say, hey, welcome to Delray Baptist Church. My name's Garrett. I'm one of the pastors here. We just want to say that if you are here and you have it all together, you're actually in the wrong place because nobody else here does. We are actually everybody in this room. Those who know it are know that the reason we're here is because only Jesus has it together. So if
Hmm.
you're coming here to try to look better than everybody else, that's going to be pretty easy, but it's a really shallow goal. So we
Hmm.
just want to set the gospel tone in the church, which
I love
is
that.
Jesus came for people who are weak and needy, and not for people who don't need a doctor, right? So I think as a leader, you have the responsibility to lead that way.
Hmm.
So if you said to our anybody in our church, it'd be like, "Hey, I heard your pastor thinks he has it all together." They would probably laugh at you because
Right.
they know that I got plenty of issues, believe me, and I struggle with pride, but I
Hmm.
am keenly aware
Hmm.
that I need God's grace very much.
Right.
I think that should come out in your teaching. So I think there's ways that you can be honest about struggles that disqualify you and undermine your authority. But I think that there's ways that you can lead honestly, that shows humility and your need for help. So our congregation would know. If I was teaching through James 5, and I get to the place where, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another, I'd say, so for instance, as a Christian, I was like, which I would remind them, I'm like, yes, I'm a pastor, but I'm
Hmm.
first a member of Delray Baptist Church, right? So
Right.
I'm first a husband, then a father, then a member of Delray Baptist Church, and who happens to be one of your pastors. So for me, like I have friends, so I have Chris and Jason and Ben.
Yep.
Those brothers, I confess my sins to them. They know
Right.
everything that's going on in my life, and I do that regularly. I confess when I'm feeling tempted, not because that's a sin, but because I'm vulnerable right now. Pray for me. So I'm even leading like that, and it's kind of the normal thing.
Right.
We want humble, open, needy Christianity to be the normal thing because that's where power comes from, right? So Jesus says, when you're weak, you're strong. Then you
Yep.
get grace. God is opposed to the proud, gives grace to the humble.
Yep.
So I think we want to set the table always to be like, we need grace. So I think that's part of our leadership posture in our teaching, our examples. I think there's ways to show this is what it
Mhm.
looks like to lean on Jesus and to need him.
Okay.
And we just try to set that tone. And we also want to train brothers and sisters
Hmm.
to be able to help walk with people who are struggling. So, say, hey, listen, today, if you've heard something, or if I'm teaching on, let's just say I'm teaching on something that has to do with sexuality,
Sure.
I'd be like, hey, listen, if you're struggling and you're a brother or a sister who's struggling with this, because it's
Hmm.
not just a dude's issue,
Yeah.
we want you to know we have people here at the church who are trained and want to walk with you. So if you're a brother, you can reach out to one of the elders. We'd be happy to connect you. If you're one of the
Mhm.
sisters, just email ladies at drbc.org or
Yep.
counseling at drbc.org, and we'll get you connected with somebody who'd be happy to walk with you. And
Yeah.
that way, you're helping to model it, and then you're providing avenues, and then it just becomes over time the culture. We
Right.
also We'll regularly have testimony opportunities.
Okay.
So we just did one of these. We call them burden and blessing services,
Hmm.
where people will talk about a really hard thing that they went through that the Lord ended up using for good in ways that they see limitedly. But
Hmm.
so recently we had one where it was a husband and wife got up and the husband confessed to having struggled with pornography for a couple of years, and the way it really was hard in their marriage, almost lost his job, all this kind of stuff. And they just made themselves available for anybody who wants
Mm.
to talk about that kind of stuff.
Okay.
We've had people who have committed adultery who've gotten
Hmm.
up and said, "Hey, this is what happened, and this is how God has healed our marriage." And like, so those kinds of testimonies actually do a lot of work, of knocking down walls and all that kind of stuff. So
Garrett, you probably don't, well, you probably realize just how uh, not normal that is in many cultures of churches. And I'm hoping by your story, you can give some breadcrumbs for pastors to go, you know what? We need to get there. So
yeah.
thank you. I want to just say it's been a privilege and a blessing to have you on the podcast. I will link those three different articles. I'll get those links so people can reference those and get a lot more information. I love the nuance. I love the hope. I love the example of God leveraging your story towards the kingdom in your life. So Garrett, thank you again for being on Pastors on Porn.
Yeah, my joy. And just brothers, if there's anybody listening today that you think, man, I need to be honest, today is the day. Like, it's God's providence that you listen to this podcast today. So, follow the example of Vern and the others who are just trying to point you to Jesus. Follow
Hmm.
him. He's worth it no matter what it costs.
Amen. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Yep.